trainer, not a bro trainer, but he's got the science behind it. He's got a lot of good credentials. He's a physical therapist assistant. We're talking about overtraining, and what does overtraining look like, and what kind of things are we can do to help combat that. And Carlos has got some great thoughts about that, so go ahead.
Overtraining, typically, like when you start seeing injuries, overuse injuries, whether it's a baseball player with an elbow issue or a runner with, you name it, IT band, plantar fasciitis, whatever's going on downstairs, you start looking at, what's happening from an overtraining. Are we getting too much mileage? Is there too much work in the gym on top of the mileage? Is there not adequate rest? And rest is huge to overtraining. And that's one of the things that we had talked about off camera was, how much rest is your athlete getting? Well, simply, like, you can just ask, hey, how much sleep did you get? What time did you go to bed? I do ask that of my high school athletes is, hey, what time did you go to bed? 11 o'clock, I had a test, I went to bed at 12. Okay, well, what time did you wake up? Woke up at 6 or 8 or 9. That's an easy test for overtraining, as well as what do you feel like? Other things that are really easy is, whether you use a hand grip dynamometer to measure on a day.
So one of the things people may not know, a hand grip dynamometer is it's a device that you can squeeze, and it will tell you how much strength you have in your hand. So one of a nice little test of some things is if you take the dynamometer and you squeeze it today and you get 100 pounds, and you squeeze it in 3 days from now and you get 80 pounds. Well, did you really lose strength? Well, the question, and that's a good question, but we need some sort of test of what's going on.
Well, when that happens, like, I'm going to ask Paul, if he squeezes 100 and then 85, like, how was your rest? How late do you stay up? Were you working on a project? What's going on? How much stress is in your life?
Right, or did you do like a big set of weights the other day or something? Or did you do in my case, did you do a big ride?
Yeah, and that recovery is like what's so huge for, we have compensation and then super compensation. That's your recovery period. And all that means is, when you're feeling that, oh man, I'm feeling really good. Paul's going to go on this 500-mile ride. Then he's going to need recovery. And everybody needs different recovery, right?
Right.
So depending on age, gender, cardiovascular output, strength, there's a lot of variables that go into how long recovery lasts.
Right.
But you have to have that recovery, because in order to have that next 600-mile ride, you have to have the recovery. If he goes from a 500 on Saturday and does a 300 on Sunday, a 600-mile ride on Monday, without any recovery, at some point it's just going to crash.
You're gonna crater, and it's gonna.
And everything goes bad from there. Everything from hey, I can't lift, I can't do stuff. Man, my balance is off. Hand grip dynamometer is piss poor.
It's just an indicator. So we're going to talk about some heart rate variability as another technique.
Heart rate variability as a measure of overtraining, as a marker for overtraining. There's lots of different devices to use for heart rate variability. Things from BioForce, Elite HRV, there's Whoop Band, there's Aura, and there's
Apple Watches.
Apple Watch too, if your watch does. I think the new Garmin's do also HRV. Basically looks at how well you're recovering.
Heart rate variability, by the way, is HRV, just in case you didn't know.
Yes.
All right, there you go. Okay.
And one of the things it looks at is, when you talk about a real good indicator for how much overtraining, are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting the right stimulus? Are you getting too much stimulus from your training, whether it's a bike ride, too much weightlifting, too much day after day, heavy load, heavy volume? How's your sleep? How's your nutrition as well? A lot of them look into, they have, I guess the app will have what are you eating? How much water did you intake? If you're like me, are you taking 10 cups of coffee a day? They look at all those things, and it'll actually measure heart rate variability and look at, okay, hey, those 10 cups of coffee you had yesterday plus the bang in the afternoon, no bueno. So it says, hey, you're in the red, man. Cut that coffee out. So those are good markers for advanced training, if you want to look at it that way. If you really want to hone in on what's.
But a lot of times, heart rate variability, you want to measure that when you're in a resting position.
Yes.
So you need to be resting. But as a heart rate variability, as a measure of overtraining, it does offer some insights and it's a pretty reliable source. It's
Yes.
not always the easiest to calculate. You know, look, the Whoop bands are pretty good for that. Not we're plugging that, but just kind of looking at those kind of factors, and if you know that if you can see that that variability is getting less and less, or you have more of it, it's, you know, why don't you explain a little bit more about what you know about that?
So when you start looking at heart rate variability, like let's say you have a day where you have a peak ride, like we were talking about, you
Sure.
riding 500,
Let's
500
say,
miles
like
in one day.
let's say a 50-mile ride.
Or 50-mile ride.
500-mile ride in a day is a little much.
I don't know. Maybe you go across Texas. Nice day to go across Texas today.
Yeah,
So
save on a plane
you do a 50-mile ride,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next day, you know, you're taking HRV and you've got a 30-mile ride, and the next day you take your HRV and you got a 40-mile ride. You're gonna find like your HRV, like your recovery rate, is gonna start telling you like, hey, wait a minute, there's not enough rest because I'm taking these long rides, right?
So what am I going to see in that variability?
Basically, like what I look at with HRV is like, you know, in the model, at least from what I understand, is I want to see, I'm trying to dumb it down, the QR wave, right?
Okay.
In your heartbeat, that
Sure.
da-da,
That's how it does it. But
Da-da.
like, yeah.
and
Right.
is that sharp, da-da, da-da, or is it a nice slow recovery,
Right.
da-da, da-da? And you know, you
Right.
want that low recovery, that high heart rate recovery. It can be the same heart rate, but as far as stroke volume is like your heart's still working really hard to help you recover. You know, when you're getting that, you know, day after day after day, like, man, there is no recovery. Like, you need some downtime, you know, whether it's your training ride or what else is it? Could it be your caffeine? Like maybe Paul's taking like, again, like,
But you will know, like, based on like what you've done the previous days. You
Yes.
can start to.
and your performance will suffer too, right?
Yeah, your performance can go down, but you can also feel kind of fatigued, I would think.
Yes.
But the variability as an indicator is something that you can look at and go, you know what? Yeah, even if I feel good,
There are times that you're not.
This is not. You know, you can't trust your feeling necessarily, and I think those, like the squeeze test and just looking at your training schedule, what you did is kind of these markers of
Right,
of how
and
to
you know
handle that.
that's getting advanced, and you know I like you know that people like to push themselves, but there comes a point where, you know, I'm going to push every day, I'm going to grind every day.
Yeah.
But you know that grinding every day isn't necessarily the best thing for you. You know, the mentality is great of pushing, but if HRV says, hey, you know what?
It's just not smart training.
Yeah, you know, why not go to something,
Right.
you know, where hey, maybe I do some mobility work, some stretching, something that's a little low level that, hey, you know what, I can work on some other stuff
Right.
and still recover and use that. Maybe I use breathing with that practice.
It's just another way to also prevent. It's really a
Overuse.
preventative of an injury, because when you're fatigued and you're not performing the way you should, that it can lead to the other instances of problems. You know, so in like runners, you'll see hip breakdowns, you'll see knee problems,
Foot,
you'll see your
calf.
times going down. It's like, why can't I get to where I want to be? And it's like, how come I'm running a 10-minute mile today or an 11-minute mile when last week I was doing 7-minute and 30-second miles, right? What's the rationale behind that? And that's, if I had paid attention to the overtraining model, then I can basically start to utilize that. And now